Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of the first sessions. Are you excited to kick off this next exciting 5 awesome days at re:Invent? Yes! Amazing. Well, it's really exciting to see so many of you here on Monday morning, woke up and ready to start. Before we start, I want you to take a moment and look at a person sitting next to you and just smile, because you never know, they might become your future friend or even a co-presenter. Well, you're laughing, but that's actually how my story with Linda started. We met here at re:Invent 2023. And before that, we didn't know each other. And during the event, Linda shared with me her inspiring story on how she started involved with the technical community, how she became a user group lead in Vienna, and later was recognized as community hero. And after the event, we went back to our normal routines, working in different countries across the world, and we just stayed in touch on LinkedIn. And you would think, working across the world, like what's there in common? But one thing left to another, and I had a trip planned to Europe. And that's when me and Linda started having a discussion, and we planned a really awesome event in Vienna at a user group when Linda invited me to speak there.
It was an indeed amazing event, and it showed us how important it is to really join forces with the whole AWS ecosystem, with AWS partners, and with everybody in our user group leader team, having such an amazing, iconic, and historical venue in the heart of Vienna. And this happened to be also the venue where I attended my very first AWS meetup.
Yeah, so indeed, the technical discussion, the networking event that was sponsored by AWS partners, it was really amazing. And after this, we just found ourselves crossing at different technical events from Seattle to New York, from Munich to Paris. And what we witnessed at these technical events, how bringing the community together creates really unique opportunities for everyone to collaborate and learn and grow and learn from each other. And that's why we are here today, because we want to share with you what we learned from organizing the technical events, building community based both online and offline, and really helping you to scale your impact. My name is Victoria. I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS. I've been with AWS for 4 years. And in the past 3 years, I also started sharing content. And because of this content creation journey, I was able to build a community from 0 to over 600,000 technical enthusiasts. So today, not only I will share with you how to build generative AI apps on AWS, but also some of the insights that I learned during my time in content creation.
My name is Linda. I'm an AWS community hero and also user group leader in Vienna. I'm also the chairwoman of our support association within the DACH community. And I'm super excited to share my insights of organizing both meetups and community days with more than 700 people for the last 5 years. And I think we can get started with jumping into the topic.
Yeah, well, since it's 2024 and everybody's talking about generative AI, so we are going to talk about how you can use generative AI to really help you to amplify your efforts. So the first thing, let's review the technical stack from AWS that it provides you to build generative AI applications. So at the bottom layer, what you can see is a cost-efficient infrastructure. So if you want to build, train models, that's where you can find accelerated compute and also SageMaker, a tool for a data scientist that you can use to train, fine-tune your models. At the middle layer, you'll find Bedrock. That's a service that allows you to experiment and access different foundation models, both from Amazon and also Amazon partners such as Anthropic, Claude, AI21 Labs, Llama, and many others. So with just a single API call, you can access different foundation models with Bedrock. And at the top layer, what you see is a generative AI applications. And those are tools that can be used by any non-technical users. And this is where really a lot of the value lies in business, because you can create these applications without coding very easily. So you can see there are like a suite of Amazon Q products, and you can find now Amazon Q pretty much anywhere. If you even open the AWS Events app, you probably saw Amazon Q there. It's in your ID, it's in your console, it's in the quick site, and so forth. So today, we are not going to talk about that queue. We're going to talk about Amazon Q Business specifically. Has anyone tried here actually experimenting with Amazon Q Business? If yes, can you raise your hand? Okay. Okay, well, not too many, maybe like 10% of you. So that's good, you're going to learn something new today. So let's just do a quick overview of what are Amazon Q capabilities. So first, what really differentiates Q from other generative AI assistants? Its ability to integrate your data. So you all probably tried like things like Claude and others where you can ask questions. But the problem is that they provide you answer based on general knowledge, right? But what if we want to bring our proprietary data and now ask questions based on our data sources? And that's why AWS built Q to help you to do that. So you can connect to your data sources using over 40 built-in connectors. So with just a few configuration clicks, you will be able to connect to, let's say, Salesforce, Google Drive. Today, we're going to show you how you can do web scraping using web crawler connector, S3 connector, and others. Once you bring your data, you bring it inside Amazon Q. And what happens when you ingest data, you ingest two things. You ingest your content, and you also ingest permissions. So if a user is not able to access data outside of Q, they will not be able to access it inside Q. Right? So when you retrieve data, what happens is Q queries the permissions against identity provider. It gets the permissions, and then based on this, it will provide the information that you are asking. And then, we often ask questions so that we can make decisions. So for this, you can use what's called plugins. So plugins allows you to make some actions based on the data. So let's say for our example, you are planning an event, and you want to learn about different speakers in the region. You identified your speakers, and now you want to send emails. So you can create a custom action from Amazon Q to start sending invites for your speaking session. There are other plugins such as Salesforce. Maybe you want to create some tickets, right, with Zendesk and others. So now that we covered our foundation basis, let me show you a sneak peek of what we're going to build today. Okay. Oh, oops, sorry. Let me go back. Okay, so imagine we are planning an event in California, and we want to organize an event there. We are unsure which city to present. So let's say we want to identify if there are any AWS user groups in California that we can collaborate. It's much easier to collaborate on events than organize our own, right? So we just ask Amazon Q, tell me the AWS user groups that are based in California, and it provides me a list of user groups along with their cities. And we will show you later how we got this information into Amazon Q so it's able to answer this question. So I see one of the cities, San Diego. Amazing city. Let's see if there are any AWS partners that are based in San Diego that can sponsor our event. So now I'm saying, OK, great. Tell me if there are any AWS partners, list their names and locations. And now I have a list of AWS partners that I can reach out and offer them to sponsor events and organize it at their location. Great. We have a venue, but let's see if there are any speakers that are based in this area from AWS. So now I'm asking, are there any AWS heroes or community builders that are based in San Diego? And it provides me an answer. Yes, there are some heroes. There is actually a serverless hero that lives nearby. Sounds great, but let's check, is serverless a trending topic? Are people interested to learn about serverless? And for this, what we did, we actually went to AWS Events YouTube. We got some views data from YouTube channel. So now we're going to drop this data in a CSV format and I'll say, based on what you're seeing from these views, tell me what's trending and what topics should I propose that will get attention from our public. And now it proposes me a topic, and it also gives me a general suggestions in terms of here's maybe you should do step-by-step implementation guides, talk about security, and a few other things. So now we got our locations, speakers, and topic. The last thing is promote event. But let's be honest, we don't want to share a post that said, I am thrilled to announce. Right? Because nobody talks like this. So instead, what I did, I actually provided captions of my post, and then I said, using my natural tone of voice, please create for me a post that, based on all of this information that we discussed, that I can share to announce event. And you can see it provides an outline. If it actually put even my call to action, follow more for content. It used different fonts. I typically use different fonts, and even created a bullet point list. So now Q adopted my style of how I communicate about events. So going from idea to implementation of this use case was honestly quite a journey. So we originally submitted a talk, we said we're going to do it, and then when we started building, we were like, oh, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So Linda is now going to tell you about our journey and the things that we learned, because I'm sure when you start building, you will also face some challenges.
Thank you so much, Victoria. So now that we know all of the new amazing capabilities of this amazing new service and this new technology, which is generative AI, probably some of you know the Gartner hype cycle. Can you raise your hand if you know this hype cycle? Oh, there are many hands up. So I see like almost half of the room is raising their hand. So that's amazing, because always when you start with experimenting with a new technology, it feels like the initial excitement is amazing. So you're exploring those new capabilities, like the 40+ connectors that are just available, that you can just use out of the box. And you're thinking about the possible solutions and applications that you can build with this new technology. So the excitement rises, and you're kind of at the peak of your expectations, and you think that AI will solve like all of your problems, and this new technology and this new service will solve all of your problems. But then you realize that there's still some homework to do, that you still have to do a lot of things. So you're facing unexpected challenges, you're facing like implementation setbacks, and I can tell you, this is quite normal. So this is just the journey of using a new technology and building a new application that you have never built before. And what you realize, that you really still have to prepare your data, that you still have to do your homework and thinking about a strategy on how to build all of that, then you actually come into the enlightenment phase, and you gain a clear understanding and a realistic view of what you can build with this new service and technology, and you're actually seeing value, and then you're reaching the peak of productivity, where you can actually use AI to improve your overall processes and also to streamline your processes and automate a lot of your tasks, as I did, for example, as a user group leader and organizing events. So before we jump into how to build all of that, let's have a look at how this event organization looks like. So here you can see our user group Vienna meetup prep guide. So this is the preparation guide that we're sending to all of our sponsors and all of our speakers, so that everybody knows what we're going to do, at which time, and who is going to do what. So we usually start with picking a date and a venue, because everybody is about where do we start, where do we meet, and when do we meet. Then we pick a topic and we find speakers. After we have all of that, we prepare the promotion, and we share, we spread the word on social media so that people know that we're about to do this event. So, but now let's jump into the first use case. Victoria will show us how to identify a location for a meetup.
Yes. So now let's dive into technical details and explore architecture as well as how we actually build this. So the first thing is for identifying a location. So first, we start with what data we need, right? So for identifying locations, we decided that we're going to use two data sources. We're going to identify AWS user groups, because this is a community that we want to partner. And the second, we decided that we want to get data about AWS partners, because then we can potentially use their location and ask them to sponsor our events. So we started with AWS user groups. So AWS user groups, if you're not familiar, they are based on, you can find them on Meetup page. So initially, we got excited. We were like, amazing, this is a static content. We are just going to use web crawlers, built-in connector, and we're going to scrape this information. However, then we were like, well, we need a directory of all AWS user groups. So we saw that they all are listed on AWS web page. However, this web page is dynamically generated. And the problem with the standard connector that currently it doesn't scrape static content. So this is where our disillusionment state came, and we were quite sad. Okay, but there is a solution for every problem, right? So after a bit of exploration, we identified an API that AWS uses to get the list of user groups. And then based on this, we created a Lambda function that would scrape all user groups, so that we can create our own custom web connector. So if we look now at AWS partners, similar, there is a page on AWS website. We thought, OK, amazing. We already know how to do dynamic scraping. It's going to be easier. But as always, there are some challenges. And then once we started looking at every page of AWS partner, we realized that they are actually more like unstructured data. We cannot just save it into CSV file, because, for example, for each partner, there might be one location, might be 14 locations. Some partners have competency programs. Some partners have additional descriptions. So we needed a way to save unstructured data. And that's where we thought, oh, well, now we can actually use a web crawler. So what we did, we got the partner IDs from just connecting from API, and then we constructed the links and used the web crawler, standard web crawler from AWS Q to create and crawl this. So now let me show you how it looks as an architecture diagram. So basically, we have the first AWS Lambda function that scrapes data from AWS user groups, creates CSV file. This CSV file is stored in Amazon S3 bucket. And then from Amazon S3 bucket, we create Amazon Q S3 connector. So remember the list of connectors I shared? So we just using the standard connector. When you create a connector, it will create like a retriever and index. And retriever will help you to, in real time, to query your index data. So once we provision this index, all the data, right, that we added in Amazon S3 will be indexed, and when you will be asking questions, it will be returned to your Amazon Q business application. Okay, now, if we want to get the data updated, right, we can just create an Amazon Event Bridge and schedule this Lambda function to run periodically. Now, for AWS partners, we followed similar paths. We created AWS Lambda function that provides to us a text file with all of the URLs that we can then use inside web crawler. Because the ecosystem of AWS is quite extensive, there are actually over 8,000 partners. We found the issue that AWS Lambda function, which is only can run for up to 15 minutes, would time out. So we had to create a step function that would resume the AWS Lambda to run from its last checkpoint. So that's where in order for us to scrape all 8,000 partners. And then once we got all the links constructed, we then used Amazon Q web crawler, and which was crawling all 8,000 partners' data. Now let me show you how you can implement this architecture in AWS console. Okay, so first thing, let me start with showing you one of the Lambda functions that is used for web scraping. So here, what you see, there's a layer created, and the layer is basically with dependencies that are needed for pandas. So here I used already pre-built layer that's provided by AWS. Then I provide an S3 bucket. So in S3 bucket, you can see it's just location of the CSV file where it will be output, the API that we're going to call to crawl our information, and then the way that our information is structured. Then you go to console and you go to Amazon Q. You can see there are several Amazon Q. As I mentioned before, we are talking today about Amazon Q business, right? So in Amazon Q business, then you select a data source, and you can see here the list of all of these different data sources that you can add with configuration. So now we're going to add a web crawler. Once you select a data source, what's really important is provide a description. You can have for one Amazon Q business up to 50 data sources. And in order for, when you ask a question for Q to understand what you are asking, you need to provide good descriptions. Then, once this is done, we can add our text file with all the links, create a role, and after this, we can set up specific sync scope. Since I'm providing the exact links, I'm going to only sync domains, but you can also sync subdomains. So here I'm providing the crawl depth 1 and to only crawl specific links that I'm providing in TXT file. If you want to crawl entire website, I suggest you to include and exclude patterns to really minimize the amount of data you're crawling. Maybe there is some irrelevant data. You can also set up a sync mode, whether you want to sync it periodically, you want to do a full sync, or only sync a new data. Since partners are not changing that frequently, we can select, let's say, once a month, and this will also help you to minimize your cost. And then once this is done, that's it. Basically, you click Create a Data Source, and you can do your first data sync. So now let's validate. So here I'm just showing you a page from NordCloud. You can see they have 14 locations. So before we ask Amazon Q, let's just ask utilizing the general knowledge, right? So let's say if Q doesn't know about our data. So here I'm selecting a general knowledge, and I'm saying, for NordCloud, give me the list of all their locations. And I mean, it did pretty good, right? It provided 9 locations, said it's an IBM company, but it didn't provide me all 14 locations. So now I'm just going to copy-paste the same question, and now I will select company knowledge. So now it's going to utilize the knowledge that we already crawled, and based on this, you can see it provides the exact addresses of 14 locations that were listed on the website. And you can see also where this data was found, right? So it provides the link of our partner. So this is how you can bring the data into the assistant and really help you to get more accurate responses. Well, now that we got our location data solved, let's move to the next chapter of identifying speakers.
Amazing. So let's have a look on how we identify the speakers. So first of all, Victoria already told you that we're scraping a lot from the AWS pages. So we also got a lot of data from the AWS community builders and also AWS heroes. So, but we don't just want to have the whole bubble of AWS community builders and heroes at our events, because as a user group leader, I know how hard it is to find speakers. So we want to leverage a little bit more content on where we can get this information. So we found out that there is this sessionized speakers directory. And you can see that there's also agriculture and arts speakers. But for a tech event, we're not really interested in those agriculture speakers. But that's why we filter the results and we look for especially people speaking about AWS topics. So what are we going to do? We're going to query this AWS parameter, so we're using the filters that we have, and then we're going to create a custom scraping so that we can get all of the data that we see on the speaker profile, and especially we want to have the names, their titles, what they are speaking about, and if they have some published sessions that we can just leverage. So here we are back to structured data, and that's why we are creating a Lambda function to custom scrape this data. But before we do that, we really have to check, are we actually allowed to get this data? Because Amazon Q Business checks the robots TXT in order to know if you're allowed to scrape the data. So if you look at the logs during seeing Amazon Q scraping, you can see that it skips everything that's not allowed. So what we are doing now is we check manually, because we're scraping this also custom, if we're allowed to scrape that. And it's fine. And we're not doing, then And then let's have a look at our data. So we already know how to get the data from the AWS community, but now we want to get also the speakers directory. Victoria already showed you on how to leverage the Amazon S3 connector with using our custom data that we're putting into the S3 bucket. And now we create a custom layer with a little bit more information. So we need beautiful soup for scraping the data, custom. It's a Python library that we can just leverage. And we need pandas to also structure our data and to prepare our data in order to store everything in the same format so that we can also use the metadata mapping that we will show you later. So then we have this AWS Lambda function that's also triggered by event bridge because we also want to have like the data regularly updated. And then we store the speakers with the AWS topics in a CSV file in the same format as we store the AWS heroes and community builders in another CSV file. Then let's have a look on how to create this Lambda function. So we go into our Lambda. So we go into Lambda, and then we scroll down to the bottom and add a new layer. So what we're going to do here, if this package of your layer is below 20 megabytes, you can just create this layer and drag and drop your file into the layer. You give it a name, and other than Amazon Q, it's not so important to have a description here, but it's optional. We just add our package here. If it's bigger, then you have to store it into an S3 bucket. We select our runtime, and then we click on create. So once we created this Lambda layer, we can use it in every Lambda function that we have in our AWS account. So we can leverage this for different use cases and just select the layer that we want to have. And here you can see that we use a custom layer because we need that if this layer is not, or if this package is not yet in the AWS ecosystem. We can also select the version that we need, and once we have created the layer, we can easily add the trigger of the event bridge and then go to the next topic on how to prepare your data. So looking at this data that we have now, you know that we have the different community builders, heroes, and sessionized speakers in the same format. But looking back, what is the service that we're using? It's using an LLM. It's using a large language model. So we figured out that it's not that easy to use just the speaker entry and use the tabular data in order to get our information. So what we did, you can see this as an example of me as a speaker from Sessionize. You can see the different information that we have in all the different data sources. But we found out that Amazon Q works best if we have this in a natural language description. So what we did, we concatenated the different strings that we have of all the different data points, and we created a natural sentence in order to help Q to understand our data better. So now let's have a look on how we add this data source. So we go back to Amazon Q Business, like we already know. Then we're selecting the S3 bucket connector. We're adding the description. We are creating a new role. I'm giving the role a name because otherwise I cannot find the created role. Then we're setting the sync scope, and also we wanna tell Amazon Q that we have a metadata mapping there because we want to make sure that we find the country and the city because we really need to know where the speaker is located in order to get in touch with the speaker. So then what we found out that in this use case, it didn't work that well with the CSV data, with the tabular data. So we created JSON files with this natural language description additionally, because the other things we mapped with the metadata. So we select the sync mode. We just want to sync the new and modified data. We run it on demand because it's just for demo purposes. And then we add the data source. So once we added the data source, we can leverage this data in our Amazon Q web experience. So let's have a look on how this is working, and we're doing it the same way. First, we ask general knowledge, and we're asking for speakers within the region of Austria. So let's have a look on what Amazon Q tells us if we're asking this for general knowledge. We can see that it apologizes because it doesn't know any speakers, because of course, it's just a general knowledge, so how should it know speakers in Austria? Then let's switch back to the company knowledge, do the same as we just saw before, we do copy and paste, and then we ask the question again. So let's have a look what Amazon Q tells us now. We can see that here is a here are a lot of speakers that on the one hand, we have heroes and community builders, but what's also important for me as a organizer of these meetups, I also want to have additional speakers. So we can see that we can also leverage the speakers from Sessionize, and so I can have an even broader speaker range that I can invite to speak at my meetups and conferences. Amazing, so let's have a look at the next use case, which is identifying the dates. And thinking about how do we identify the date for a meetup. For example, we don't want to do this meetup during a time where, for example, the reInvent is, because a lot of people are going to Las Vegas and probably nobody would attend a meetup somewhere else than at this bigger events. So let's show you, now I will show you how you can leverage, for example, search requests like we did that, and we're going to search and then inspect the network traffic in order to get the API requests that we want to leverage to get this data. We're looking for events in Vienna. Okay, there are no events in Vienna, but that's fine because we just want to see how the search is going to work. Then we're having a look at the headers and checking the URL. And once we copy and paste this URL, we can see that we get a JSON data back that we can just leverage and store into our S3 bucket, as Victoria already explained. We can also prettify this data in our browser, and then let's move on how we can leverage this. And also, we don't want to just focus on AWS events, but we know that on meetup.com, it's not just AWS meetups, but for example, we also have a DevOps community in Vienna and a lot of other meetups, and we have kind of the same target group because they're also speaking about cloud topics and also AWS, so we also want to scrape all of the technology events that are on meetup.com. So let's have a look at our architecture. We already know how to leverage the Amazon S3 connector, but now we have something different. We're still using the web crawler, and looking at the meetup events, we figured out that, okay, we have to log in order to get events from meetup.com. So what are we going to do? We're going to set up the secret in AWS Secrets Manager in order to leverage the Amazon Q web crawler that is just built in. And let's have a look on how this is working. So we're back in Amazon Q Business, adding another data source. And this data source now is, again, the web crawler. And we are doing all of the same things that we just did. And also, as Victoria already mentioned, we want to give it a good description so that Amazon Q knows what it's actually scraping and what the data source is about. So we say that this data source is about similar events of meetup data, and in order to let Q know that this is about events in different regions. So then we select the source, which is the source URL, and we check and we add the source URL to the field in the source URL. Next one, we are going to add the authentication. So you have to figure out which authentication for which page is the best, but actually you can just create this authentication and secrets directly within the web crawler. So let's create a new secret and check how this secret is added to scraping the meetup page. We give the secret a name, we add the login page URL, and then we have to find out the XPath of of the labels of the login page and also the password. So we can see that this can be done with the browser inspect again. So let's go to inspect, and then we look at our label field. We go to copy XPath, and then we go back to the web crawler. We enter the XPath, then we go to the password. We do the same. We copy the XPath, and then we again go back into Q Business web crawler, and we add this password field. So I'm going to show you. This is not a secret, but it acts like it's a secret, of course, because it's a password field. So then we have to add the password button XPath and create this new secret. So we're not going to save this for now. And once we go down, we also select the things that we already know, like giving the role a name, creating a role. We select the sync cycle. Now we want to sync the domains with subdomains, and also we set the crawl depth to 2 because we don't want to just scrape the list of meetups, but we want to scrape the actual meetup page in order to get the information what this meetup is actually about. So let's go on again, new and modified data, because we want to keep the costs low, and then we add the data source. Perfect, so once we added the data source, we can click on Sync Now, and always when you're using a web crawler, there's a two-part scraping mechanism. So first of all, it's syncing and crawling, and as I already told you, it checks the robots.txt if it's actually allowed to scrape this, and after that, it's indexing the data. So now let's have a look on how this is working when we leverage more and more data from our data sources. So usually what we do in our meetup, somebody asks a question on when could we do the next meetup, and what I did now, just to check if this is working with a real world use case, I just copy and paste one of these questions that we got in Slack, and we check if this is working, because Amazon Q also knows a lot about our AWS user group, because the prep guide that you saw in the beginning, we also use that as a document upload. So it tells us that usually the user group Vienna does its meetups on Tuesday or Thursday, and so it tells us that in February, also thinking about the holidays that are up, we should do the meetup on either the 11th or the 13th of February. Which is fine, and which is really amazing, because then we don't have to think about this, and it also takes into consideration the other events that are happening in this region. But now let's have a look at the last step, promoting the event. Victoria.
Yes, so now we are up to our last step. So we have venue planned, we have speakers, we identify dates. So now it's time to let the world know, right, so that they all come and join our fantastic event. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't want just to say, I am thrilled to announce the next serverless meetup, right? So we want first, let Amazon Q be able to speak our language and communicate just as we do. We also want Amazon Q to a little bit understand about like what's trending and give it a little more like technical depth knowledge on how community talks about events. So what we do for this? Well, the first thing that we're going to do, we will go to AWS events page. And by the way, all of the breakout sessions from AWS reInvent will be then posted on this AWS events YouTube channel. So if you miss something, or including this session, you will all find them later on AWS events YouTube channel. So now we were like, OK, that's amazing. It's a public web page. We're just going to use a web crawl. We're going to scrape it. But as you learned, right, it just doesn't work always as we wish it would have worked. So what we found that while this data is public, actually YouTube prohibits to use automatic crawling. So Linda shared with you earlier about robot.txt, right? So you cannot use this. It's not allowed. But YouTube provides actual API. So we can use YouTube API and get all of this information. And that's exactly what we did. Then we looked at how can we give it a bit more knowledge. How can we give a Q to speak just like community speaks? Well, there is this website that's called community.aws, where community members and AWS employees publish blog posts. So we said, OK, well, that's great. That's static content. And actually, we got really lucky here because the whole website is static, so we didn't have to come up with some manipulations in this case, and we just scraped the whole website using web. Then I provided to Q a few examples of my post captions so that it understands how I speak to my audience, so that it would help me now to write a post and announce about an event. So that's regarding the data. So now let's look at the architecture. So first, we have AWS Lambda functions that gets data from AWS Events YouTube. We get a CSV file, store it in S3, create S3 connector. Now we have it in Amazon Q. And then for our website with community blogs, we just use a regular web crawler. And now let's talk about that. Now that we've done all the prep with data, one thing that we don't want to do, we don't want to ask the same questions again and again, right? So like, we don't want to say, hey, give me the speakers, give me the venue, give me the dates. We want to create something where we just enter a couple parameters and it provides us all the information. And that's what you can do using Amazon Q apps. So before, we were showing you how you can chat with data. But from this chat, you can click on Create Amazon Q app, and based on the questions that you ask, it's going to create for you an application that you can then reuse. Or you can use a second way of creating an application, which is describing an app. Personally, I prefer to describe my app because it's really simple. You just provide a few directions. For example, you can say, here are 2 input windows where I'm going to enter, let's say, city and event topic. And based on them, create for me 3 output UI elements where you will propose the venue, you will propose the topic, and create promotional content. So it's just that simple, just describing in plain English. Then it's going to create for you this application, and you can actually go and then edit it, right? So you can make some changes. You can adjust a prompt for each window. You can also adjust data sources. So let's say for venue, we are not really that interested about indexing and querying our data about speakers, right? So in the venue widget, I can select just AWS partner and AWS user groups. And I can uncheck everything else. And this will help with performance of your application. So look into this. Then for each card, you can also adjust the prompt. You can utilize the data that Q provides in a different card. So card is basically a window or UI widget. So let's say if I want for the venue, get the data from speakers, I just need to put speakers, and it will get all the data from that Q generated, and then will provide me in addition to all of the data sources. So let me now just show you how it works in console. I think it will make it a bit easier to understand. So now I'm here in the Q app. So I'm asking, help me to build an event app, and I will have 2 input widgets, topic and city. And based on this, suggest me speakers, suggest me proposed venues, and create a promotional outline using the data sources that I provided, and that's it. So now it's going to create, based on what I suggested, this app for me. So now I can go and adjust, so you can see the prompt, that it automatically outlined based on the instructions I provided, and you can go and you can change it in your own words, and you can also adjust this company node. What you can also do, you can add additional widgets. So let's say maybe I'm interested also to create some kind of visual element. So together with my post, not only show text, but also show image. So you can create an additional card, which will be a new window, and then you can create a new prompt there. So now I'm going to create output. Basically, output is what Q is going to generate. Input is what I'm providing. Output is what Q generating for me. So in this case, I'm going to say this is image, and write the prompt and generate image based on the event city. Maybe there will be like some views, right? City views, and event topic. Something technical, right? So now I don't really need the company knowledge for this, so I can say just the general knowledge. Whatever the LLM already has a general knowledge, just use this information. And that's it, let's try it. So now I'm saying event topic is Bedrock and event city is Vienna. So now I'm just providing 2 words rather than typing and asking all of these questions. And you can see it provides me first suggested speakers, actually identified in Vienna, Linda, so good job, Q. And then once it finishes speakers, it then starts looking for suggested venues. And you can see it identified AWS partners that are based in Vienna. So now it saves us so much time, right, than going to the different data sources and searching for information. So you can just go, change the city, and get right away your information in an app in a matter of seconds. And once it will finish the promotional content, you can see it also going to create for us a prompt that we can then use somewhere to generate image. So it actually provided me 5 different prompts that I can then copy paste and use to create an image that will go together with my promotional post. So now we are done with building our Amazon Q app. We can actually publish it and share it with our team members so they can take advantage of it. So now I'm going to invite Linda just to summarize. We discussed so many different things about the different use cases, and she will share the finished architecture of this entire solution.
Amazing, thank you so much. So let's have a look on what we build now. So you know that we also leveraged the document upload. We didn't show that, that's super easy to use. And also we used a lot of CSV files and S3 bucket. We used the web crawler. We used the text files of the URLs of the partner, of the AWS partners. And we also used our Google Drive that we're using within the user group team in Vienna. So we fed all of the data into Amazon Q, and then we already know that we have the identity provider which manage all of the permissions, and we have the user who can query the different information, like I could ask when would be a good date for the next AWS meetup in Vienna, but also it knows a lot about the community, so I can also ask when would be a good date for the AWS Community Day DACH in Munich, for example. So what we did then, we created those apps in order to combine everything that we wanted to ask. So we have the event organizer app and we have the event planning assistant. We can create more and more apps and just publish them within our organization. But now let's have a look at our whole architecture. So what we build is we have all of the different data sources below, the web crawler that uses the meetup events. We have the web crawler with the community blogs. We're also additionally using our public Notion page from our user group Vienna in order to get even more information about how such a meetup and how such events are organized. We have our S3 bucket with all of the custom scraping that you see on top, with the user groups, the AWS partners, the sessionized speakers, and also the heroes and community builders and the AWS videos. We have our custom layers that we stored in the S3 bucket because in the end it was more than 20 megabytes. And we have our metadata mapping where we map the different information that we need, like the country or the city of the speaker speaking. Then you can see that every user has to authenticate in order to use the Amazon Q web application, which is then leveraging the Amazon Q business index, where we fed all of the data sources in. And you can also see that we're leveraging EventBridge for all of our custom Lambda functions in order to periodically trigger the Lambda to fetch the data. So let's go to the key takeaways. So what are our key takeaways? We found out that, of course, for this generative AI, you have to have a really specific use case. We're not there yet that we have this general artificial intelligence, so really make sure that you have a specific use case and that you also have a comprehensive data strategy and think about which data you need. How often do you have to update your data? How recent does it have to be? Probably it doesn't have to be updated every day because always when you update the data, also the index is updated, and of course you have to pay for that. So we really want to optimize for cost efficiency and really think about what we need in order to have the results that we expect to have. And also, what we showed you, we have to ensure compliant AI implementation because we cannot just use everything that's publicly available. We really have to make sure to check, are we allowed to use this data? And last but not least, we shared some resources to get started. We're going to share more and more information on how we built this application in our GitHub repository. So the first QR code you can scan to get the information on how we built that. We will update it for the other use cases. And also there's a workshop on how to build generative AI and Amazon Q business applications. Feel free to take a picture so that you can save these QR codes. And thank you so much.